So what's the difference between server and client-side fetching? Here I have an example of a server-side fetch. As you can see, when I refresh the page, the data is instantly available. And when we look at a client-side fetching example, when I refresh the page, the data takes a while to appear, and that's because it's waiting for the initial page load before it begins to fetch. Even though server-side fetching is technically faster, there is a trade-off in that the initial page load will be slower. Now let's add a 2-second await to our getPost function. And as you can see, when you refresh the page now, the server fetch will take about 2 seconds to appear. If we try to go to it from an external source, it would take 2 seconds before we get anything back. Versus a client-side fetch, you should see that the page will instantly load, but it will still take 2 seconds for the data to appear. To solve that problem with server fetching, you would have to create a new server component and abstract your list of to-dos into that component. So here, all I'm doing is abstracting my to-do list into this new component, and I'm fetching the data from this component as well. And all you have to do is put the component back up here, and then wrap it in suspense. And for client-side fetching, all you have to do is use the isLoading provided to you by the useQuery hook from TanStackQuery, and then use that isLoading to provide a loading state. And now, as you can see, when I refresh the server fetching example, okay, so that didn't work. Okay, I forgot to delete. Remember to delete this getPost function, and now that should work. So you can see as soon as I click refresh, you can see the initial page load, and then the data is still streaming in, so it's loading in. Now let's look at the client-side fetching. So it's still the same as before. The loading state will show until the data is available. So with server-side fetching, if you wanted to refetch the data or fetch something else, how would you do that? So you could just have a update button, for example, and this will need to be a client component. And you could use router.refresh or push or replace. So if you wanted to just refresh the data, just use router.refresh. But if you wanted to fetch something else, you could use router.push instead and then pass in search params like this. Or you could use server actions instead to do the refetching. So here we have an add post action, and in this action you could add a post to your database, and after that all you have to do is call revalidate path and then pass in the route you're on. And with client-side fetching, it's very simple. Just use the refetch function that you get from the useQuery hook, and then use that refetch function in a button. So as you can see, in my opinion, there's very little reasons to use client-side fetching anymore. I think server fetching is just superior. It can do almost anything client fetching can do, and it's just more performant and better SEO. Now there are a few cases where you would still want to use something like TanStackQuery, because TanStackQuery provides to you baked-in implementation for things like infinite fetching or polling features. And by the way, if you wanted to see how to implement infinite scrolling and polling features in Next.js 14, just click the video above.